Kyle, welcome in, man. I hope your summer is going well so far.
Oh man, it's going great. Fired up to be here. Let's talk some Auburn football, basketball, baseball, whatever. Let's go.
Well, Auburn baseball is doing well. We talked about that in the first segment. Let's go first. We were talking about this earlier. The interview that Hugh did with us, where it's perceived by some that just making a bowl game would be a step forward in his eyes. Others heard that differently. As an Auburn guy, you know the comment I'm talking about. How did that play with you? What do you think Hugh Freeze was trying to say there?
Well, so I listened to the question and I listened to his answer, and one word that was never used was goal. Goal was never used as far as like that's our goal to make a bowl game. The way I took it is, Lance basically asked him, "Hey man, the first two seasons weren't that great as far as results go. Do you feel like you're under the gun?" And I think he was trying to say, and he answered it a little bit better a couple of days later. But I think he was trying to say, "Look, I'm not a dummy. I know if we don't make a bowl game again, I'm in trouble." That's kind of the way that I took it. He said multiple times, 8-9 wins I think would be a good step in the right direction, and I think that's been pretty consistent as far as his message goes. As far as his message has gone since these questions have been asked. But that's kind of the way I took it. Hey, look, I'm not a dummy. I know that if we miss a bowl again, I'm going to be in trouble.
Well, Kyle, we went back and we played his comments from last year going into year two, and he talked about, when he was in Oxford, how they, got better each year. I mean, the fact of the matter is, look, they might have been a better team, but the record wasn't there. Going from 6-7 to 5-7 in year three, when you've got, you've got a top 10 signing class coming in, you get some big gets in the portal, including Jackson and Singleton and the two tackles we talked about. For a guy that is around the program, what is your expectation in year three? I don't want to say what's the bare minimum for you, but what do you really expect?
Yeah, I mean, and you throw in, I think Pro Football Focus just put out their top wide receiver rooms in the country, and Auburn's at number 2. I think Singleton and Cam Coleman are the only ones that they have in their top 10 of returning wide receivers. So you guys have Auburn, I think, at 27?
Yes.
As far as, I think, preseason, you're seeing a lot of preseason accolades inside the top 25. And like you said, you've added a whole bunch of new additions that have this roster looking more like, at least on paper, a more competitive SEC roster. And I think, honestly, anything south of 8 wins, I think you've lost several games that you shouldn't have lost. I think Auburn's going to have a better roster than arguably at least 8 of the teams they're going to play. And then you can have a discussion about maybe 9, depending on how you see Texas A&M's roster. I think that you got the talent there. Now you got to go do it. And like you said, there were some tangible things that you could look at to see a jump as far as production goes on the offensive side from year 1 to year 2. But the critical pieces, which you actually mentioned in that particular clip as well that you're talking about, those critical pieces inside the red zone, turnovers, special teams, those could be the difference. Those could have been the difference last year in 3 or 4 games, and you got to get that done. You got to change that this year.
I really believe that quarterback play can be impacted tremendously by offensive line play.
Sure.
You look like a crappy quarterback if you got a crappy offensive line. Pro Football Focus, since you brought them up, last week has Alabama with the best offensive line in the country, has Auburn with the 7th best offensive line in the country, not in the SEC. Do you see that much improvement with the additions they have on that Auburn offensive line? Because that would be huge for quarterback play.
No question. To your point, I mean, think about from a play caller standpoint. Can they block this play long enough? And then can the wide receiver run the route? Can they give the wide receiver enough time to run the route the way they need to? It condenses your playbook. It changes the way that you go about sequencing and things like that. With the addition of Xavier Chaplin, I really wish he could have participated a little bit more during spring. But, I mean, you went and got a number 1 offensive tackle out of the portal versus last year. I know people like to point to Percy Lewis, that whole disaster that happened. But Percy Lewis was like the 13th ranked offensive tackle in the portal last season. And you went and you got, I think, depending on which site you look at, the number 1 or the number 2 franchise starter in a Power 5 conference type guy at left tackle, and then you've got competition on the other side with Mason Murphy, and then you got Xavier Miller, Too Tall Miller, that has another year. There's just a lot of pieces. Connor Lew, center's getting a lot of his going into his third year, getting a lot of NFL talk as far as could he possibly leave early, maybe sneak his way into a second round pick. I like the continuity, and then I like the addition of the high level pieces that they were added to kind of solidify Auburn's starting five. I really do. I think the pieces are there to be better. You just got to go. You got to go do it. Last year they did have some bad moments, but they gave up less sacks and you had more yards per carry last year than you had the year prior. Now, where I always said that the weaknesses showed is when they knew Auburn had to pass, it gave Auburn problems, and when they knew Auburn had to run, it gave Auburn problems. In other words, short yardage situations or obvious passing downs. So you definitely can get better in that area. And I think I really like the additions. I think they can be big for this offensive line.
Kyle, I was very redundant over the last couple of years saying the most underutilized guy maybe in the SEC was Rivaldo Fairweather. Now with the Cowboys, is tight end ever going to be a factor?
And that's a great point, and it's something that I've been pointing to since I guess the offseason. Rivaldo played virtually every snap, and he lined up most of his time in the slot, kind of like a big slot receiver. Traditional tight end, Auburn's got a couple of pieces there. You got Brandon Frazier that's coming back for, I think, his 10th year. I think he signed under Gus. He actually did sign. He was in Gus's last class. He's going to be probably your more traditional tight end. And then I think, honestly, you're going to have such a rotation of wide receivers. I think you're going to try to get that production from Rivaldo, from like guys like Perry Thompson and Horatio Fields, a little bit more of your bigger bodied receivers than just having, a 6'5", 240-pound wide receiver out there. Auburn really doesn't have that player this season, but I don't know that you necessarily need him.
Wow. Why would you not need him? Because of all the receiver talent?
I'm saying you don't. I'm saying I don't think you necessarily have to have that 6'5", 240-pound guy, because I think you have so many different wide receiver options. And again, he wasn't a true – he didn't line up on the end of the line of scrimmage. He lined up out in the slot. He was just a big slot wide receiver, and I think you got options for that maybe even be a little bit more athletic out of this wide receiver room. I mean, Perry Thompson's 6'3", 220 pounds. So you could easily put him in that position and let him run, get in a matchup on a linebacker or a safety, and he's going to be just as big and maybe even more athletic than a Rivaldo. And you got a bunch of options on the outside that if you want to throw those jump balls to. I'm just saying I think you're not going to miss his production because of how good and how deep this wide receiver room is and how many different types of formations and things you can put out there against defenses.
I know we'll get to Jackson Arnold in a second, but let's flip to defense. I really think Auburn spending money and keeping DJ Durkin was huge this offseason. What do you think of DJ and what he has done on that defensive side of the ball, and how good could they be this year?
Man, I love DJ, and I think the kids love DJ too. He's made a huge impact. He's kind of opening up avenues as far as recruiting goes that Auburn's traditionally really never had, like getting players from Maryland and that St. Francis Academy kind of, I don't want to call it a pipeline, but you've had a lot of success there. Just from the recruiting aspect, he's been phenomenal. He's been able to take some of the guys that have been there a while and enhance them. And then he's also not been afraid to play young guys, and they've hit on those young guys, and those young guys go out there and make plays. I think about a guy like Jay Crawford last year who eventually worked his way into the starting lineup, and he's going to be one of the, I would say, probably have one of the better seasons if things keep progressing of any corner in the SEC. So he's been great, and I hope they can keep him here for as many years as they possibly can. I like this defense this year. I think up front, I'm going to be anxious to see in the middle how Auburn handles things on the defensive line. I think they got some great pass rushing options. The defensive backfield should be phenomenal. And then linebacker, you got some young guys, but who plays where and how do you work that rotation? I think that's going to be in the middle on the defensive line, and then at linebacker, to me, are the biggest question marks.
Okay,
not necessarily bad question marks, but
So, Kyle, we know Keldrick Falk is going to be a stud coming back from 7 sacks, and he's going to be one of the best in the conference. Who complements him, another edge guy?
So, obviously, you have I really like what I'm hearing out of Amaris Williams. Last year he was a big flip late in the cycle, late in the recruiting cycle, and he came in with a lot of accolades as a freshman. And he even said in an interview, I didn't have my head on correctly. I didn't really take things – do things the way I should have been doing them. And he actually, remember, he went into the portal in December and then came back out because I think he's really a foundational piece that I think Auburn wants to have as far as that next in line behind Keldrick Falk. So I think that's a guy that's going to see a lot of snaps and make a big jump this year. And then Kieron Crawford, their portal edge that they got last season that sort of backed up Jalen McLeod, he came on as the season went on, and I think he's going to be relied upon to be the first real line of defense at getting to the quarterback. So those are a couple of guys that I think you put them in the mix with Keldrick Falk, and I think you can present some problems for some quarterbacks.
Hey, when you look at Auburn's schedule, is there an early game that you think sort of sends the season down, sort of a fork in the road game, sends the season down a good way or a bad way? Maverick in the chat room says he thinks it's the trip to Norman in Oklahoma. Do you have one? I mean, it could be as early as Baylor, but do you have one?
You named it. I don't want to be like a doom and gloom guy, but I really think that Baylor game will set the tone for the whole season. I think obviously you can always rebound, but in particular on offense, if you go out in those first, 2 or 3 drives and you're seeing a lot of the same things and you're turning the ball over or you're not being able to extend drives, like I don't know what that does to the confidence of everybody, as you head on down into the season. But you mentioned Norman. That is a big game as well. If you get by Baylor, you have those 2 tough road games back to back. You go to Oklahoma, then you go to Texas A&M. I don't think necessarily one of those is more important than the other, but I think you need to at least win one of them. If you want to get to 9 games, you need to try to split those 2. And I think if you can do that, and you can be 4-1 through those first 5 games, you got a chance to, at least be in the conversation later in the year.
How confident are you telling us right now, June 2nd, who the leading rusher for the Auburn Tigers will be?
I have no idea. I have zero confidence. Funny you asked that. So you brought in Darrell Robinson, which I think a lot of people are sort of like, you needed another back, but you don't know much about him. And then he came in, he had a bad foot, had to have a procedure done on his foot as soon as he got here, so you didn't see him in spring. Auburn just hosted Jaira Edwards, who was another one of those St. Francis guys, 5-star safety, this past weekend. And they were doing his exit interview, and he just kept talking about Darrell Robinson. He's like, guys, this guy is big. He's had turf toe really bad the first 2 seasons. Big guys aren't able to typically do what this guy can do as far as the way he can move laterally and explode. I'm not going to be shocked. I say that to say I'm not going to be shocked if any one of the three really take it and run. I love Damari. He's been the more steady guy. Jeremiah Cobb has the ability to be a big play guy. But then what do you have out of this Darrell Robinson kid? I mean, he's a little bit different, a different body type than the others, and at least I know it's a former teammate, but getting some insight to his game that maybe we don't typically see. So I really don't know who's going to be the leading rusher. It's going to be fun. It'll be by a committee, and then maybe when someone gets hot, you let them ride with it.
For decades, one of the more consistent phases in Auburn's game was special teams, and boy, it was a wild ride last year. 12 of 22 on kicks. A lot of that was McPherson and whatever that mysterious illness was. Where is he right now? And Connor Gibbs, kid coming in from Southern Miss, where did those guys stack up?
So oddly enough, I honestly didn't hear Connor's name really at all spring. I'm not really sure exactly where he is progression wise or where he fits into the rotation, but it sounds like Alex has actually been able to gain some weight. I know that the issue he has is volatile, and I think it can flare up at any point in time, but he was very steady. I wouldn't be surprised. And then Towns also had a great spring. Towns, to me, that was just a terrible situation for him last year. You go in, I can't remember if it was Arkansas or Oklahoma. You go in there, it's a fire drill field goal, and you got to run the whole special teams in there quick, and he hooks it. And then luckily they got an offsides, but then you go and do it, and it's in your head, and he hooks it again. And then, from then on, it's just in your head. And that was only his freshman year. I think it could be – I think Alex, as long as he can stay healthy, I think anything from 40 and in, you can just about count it. He quite literally was perfect the year prior. He never missed a field goal. So he's getting back into the shape where he can be relied upon for at least some short yardage stuff. And then if you need to go a little bit deeper, I think Towns is still going to handle place kicking. And if you need to kick a 50-plus yarder, he's got plenty of leg to be able to do that. So I think the kicking situation could fix itself just with those two guys, Alex being a little bit healthier, and then Towns just getting those freshmen, yips out and hopefully kind of working himself back into, being who he was in A-Day. Remember, he hit 7 field goals in A-Day 2 years ago. I think he can be that guy again.
Okay, you can get Kyle. We got one more question here, but you can get Kyle and Zach and all of them over at thebarnauburn.com. thebarnauburn.com. Go check it out. A lot of free content, shows over there every day with the Top Button podcast. Get your morning going there with Kyle. Football, basketball, 365 days a year. Great stuff over there, thebarnauburn.com. Go check it out. Its own website, its own YouTube and everything. My last question is, we wanted to get a lot of Auburn content out without getting bogged down in quarterback because it's such an unknown. But confidence level on what you're hearing about Jackson Arnold after spring, going into the summer, waiting on August, do you foresee this being an upgrade at quarterback, and how good could Jackson Arnold be, in your opinion, from the people you talk to?
What I typically say is I think if you handed Hugh Freeze a ball of clay and said, I want you to build the most ideal quarterback for what you like to do, I think that quarterback would look a lot like Jackson Arnold. I think from the athletic ability standpoint, the ability to run, he was recruited to Oklahoma under that Jeff Lebby offensive system, RPO, vertical type offense. And then obviously Jeff left after his freshman year. I think there's a lot of similarities between what Lebby does and what Hugh wants to do. And I can see the traits, and I can see the way that, throwing off platform and being able to, run those option plays. You saw what he did at the end of the season last year at Oklahoma, where essentially they just went to the triple option, and he really, took down Alabama and won some big games. Looked good against Ole Miss at times too. I think he's a really good fit. To me, Jackson, it's not about ability. It's all about confidence, and I can tell that Hugh is definitely locked in on that. You can talk about, like he said, where we don't do this whole we want to leave with a quarterback. We want to leave practice with a quarterback feeling confident, and to me that seems like it's the goal. Can we help keep Jackson feeling confident and feeling good about the system and good about his play? That's the key to me. All the athletic ability pieces are there, but can you protect him and help his confidence stay at a level to where he can go out there and produce? I think that's going to be the number one battle this year. And if that happens, I think he can be a really good quarterback. I think he looks a lot like he's got a lot of like Bo Nix, look to his game. To me, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Bo, and I think Bo would have been another really good fit in this system. So it's all about what happens between the ears, I think, with Jackson.
Aaron said it right after he typed it. You said it at the same time, all about swagger and confidence. Kyle, man, we appreciate your time. Top Button Podcast, thebarnauburn.com. Auburn number 27 in our 40 and 40 countdown. On the Shannara hotline, that is Kyle Rush. Man, thank you, Kyle. We appreciate you.